Okay, we're picking up in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 27. And I'm going to start with you, verse 27 through 33.
Through what?
33.
Okay. And there came a man of God to Eli and said to him, Thus says the Lord, Did I indeed reveal myself to the house of your father when they were in Egypt, subject to the house of Pharaoh? Did I choose him out of all the tribe of Israel to be my priest, to go up to my altar, to burn incense, to wear an ephod before me? I gave to the house of your father all my offerings by fire from the people of Israel. Why then do you scorn my sacrifice and my offerings that I commanded for my dwelling, and honor your sons above me by fattening yourselves on the choicest parts of every offering of my people Israel? Therefore the Lord, the God of Israel, declares, I promise that your house and the house of your father should go in and out before me forever. But now the Lord declares, Far be it from me, for those who honor me I will honor, and those who despise me shall be lightly esteemed. Behold, the days are coming when I will cut off your strength and the strength of your father's house, so that there will not be an old man in your house. Then in distress you will look with envious eyes on all the prosperity that shall be bestowed on Israel, and there shall not be an old man in your house forever. The only one of you whom I shall not cut off from my altar shall be spared, to weep his eyes out, to grieve his heart, and all the descendants of your house shall die by the sword of men.
Okay, so we left off last week. We had Eli is the high priest, and he has two sons that are way out of control. And so this guy comes up and starts giving him a word. We have no idea who this guy is. But we will find out. He must be a prophet, because what he says happens. He is speaking on behalf of God. And on behalf of God, he says, Didn't I appear to you, appear to Aaron, your ancestor? And now I'm appearing to you. He's appearing through a prophet. Verse 28 is a good list of what the high priest should be. First off, he should be God's priest. He should be ministering to the Lord over and above all things. That is his primary duty. Other duties: bring sacrifices to God at the altar, burn incense, wear priestly clothing, receive all the offerings. Those are all duties of the priesthood. And this guy, through God, is saying, your sons are terrible. They're not doing these things. They are disobeying God, and they are the priests. What is up with that? And Eli could have said, it's not me, it's my sons. But Eli was doubly accountable for them. First off, he is their dad, and he apparently doesn't discipline them. And he is their boss as the high priest. As a high priest, he should be keeping the priest under control. And he is doing neither one of those. The purpose behind this whole message, Hophni and Phinehas, his sons, God is saying they're beyond saving. But Eli might be called back to repentance. Hophni and Phinehas, they're gone. But for Eli to repent, it means he has to reject his sons. That would be pretty hard to do. Then the prophet says, you put your sons ahead of the Lord. If Eli were more afraid of offending God than he was of offending his sons, he would have corrected them like he should. Eric Liddell was one of Britain's great athletes, and later he gave his life for Jesus on the mission field. In 1924, he was to run for Britain in the Olympics when he discovered that the preliminary heat of his best event, the 100 meters, would be run on a Sunday. and he firmly but quietly refused to run. On the day of the final race, apparently he made it to the final race, as Lytle was standing on the starting blocks, this unknown man came and slipped a paper in his hand, and it quoted 1 Samuel 2:30, "Those who honor me, I will honor." And that day he set a world record. So Eli is not honoring God. So this prophet passes on the message that Eli, your family is going to become powerless. Now, it doesn't come to complete fulfillment until it's 2 Kings 2:27, when Solomon removed Abiathar, a descendant of Eli, from the high priesthood. And then he replaces him with Zadok, who was descended from, Aaron had 2 sons, and Eli and his family, they were descended from Ithamar. But Zadok, who will end up being the high priest, he's descended from Eleazar. So it's the high priesthood still stays in the family of Aaron, but not in the family of Eli. It's taken away from his family. We also hear God is not going to allow any of the males in Eli's family to live a long life. We see that fulfillment in the death of his 2 sons that we'll see in the next chapter, but we're going to see it later. When Saul was chasing David, and David had gone to the priests for food, then Saul comes in and kills all the priests. That included any descendants of Eli. Now, according to Moses and the instruction he received from God, Eli should have removed his sons from the priesthood, and he should have had them killed. And it may seem like a really strict thing, but it would have taught the people fear of God. Obey me, or you face the consequences. Now it's like, these guys get away with everything. Why shouldn't I do what I want? So they're not an example of God. And God will take care of it. They're seeing these 2 priests run amok, and they're wondering, where's God? God will take care of it. He'll take care of it in chapter 3. Okay, verse 34 through 36.
What happens to your 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, will be a sign to you. They will both die on the same day. I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who will do according to what is in my heart and mind. I will firmly establish his house, and he will minister before my anointed one always. Then everyone left in your family will come and bow down before him for a piece of silver and a crust of bread and plead, appoint me to some priestly office so I can have food to eat.
Okay, so this is again one of those judgments that some of it's coming real soon. His sons will die. Some of it will happen in the future. We are going to see that both of his sons will die on the same day. Imagine what is going through Eli's head to know that this guy is here talking for God and saying, your sons are going to die. And there's nothing you can do about it. It says God will raise up a faithful priest. What this is one of those double things. It's partially fulfilled because Samuel becomes a godly priest and God raises him up. It partly took place in the days of Solomon when he replaces Eli's family with Zadok as the high priest. But then ultimately is fulfilled with Jesus Christ, who is our high priest forever. Now, what's another thing that's going to happen to Eli's family, anyone that's left, they are going to become so poor that they're going to have to beg for food because they're not going to be the high priest. Right now, Eli's sons take money, take food. They're doing pretty well, but that's going to change. Okay, now we're in 1 Samuel 3, and this is what the pastor's preaching today, so that's kind of cool. Verse 1.
Now the boy Samuel ministered to the Lord before Eli, and the word of the Lord was rare in those days, and was no widespread revelation.
Okay, so this is the third time we hear about Samuel ministering to the Lord. It's an important thing. And the verb tense that's used, it means he's continuously ministering. It's not an on and off thing. His whole life is dedicated to ministering to the Lord. Wouldn't that be a great way to be remembered? As someone that ministered to the Lord all the time. You could just look at their lives. And the only word of the Lord that we saw in the first 2 chapters was judgment. And especially judgment against Eli. God has not been talking because they're not going to listen anyway. He's not going to force himself. Proverbs 8:17, God says, I love those who love me, and those who diligently seek me will find me. They were not seeking him. And because of the hardness of their heart and the corruption of the priesthood, God isn't speaking to them. God will speak, he'll guide when his people seek him. When they don't, he'll stay silent. So this is a time of silence from God. Verse 2 and 3.
One night Eli, who was almost blind by now, had gone to bed. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was sleeping in the tabernacle near the ark of God.
I'm sorry, and verse 4.
Okay. Suddenly the Lord called out, Samuel?
Keep going.
And he said,
He
said,
well, I have a different translation.
Oh.
Well, there's another sentence there.
Yeah.
is there...
Oh, that. Yes, Samuel replied.
Okay, that's what we want. Wait. Okay.
It's in a new paragraph.
Yeah. So Eli was physically blind, but he's also spiritually blind. He was not being an effective leader at all. So God just ignores Eli, and he's not talking straight to Eli. He is talking to Samuel. One optometrist said Eli probably had cataracts. Very possible. So it says Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord where the ark was. He was, of course, not in the same room as the ark, because no one was allowed in there except the high priest one day a year. So that he's not sleeping there, but he's sleeping in the outer room that has the menorah and the showbread and everything else. One of his jobs would have been to keep that menorah lit all night. It had to stay lit all night. So that's one of his jobs. So that's where he's sleeping. Now Eli must not have been in the exact same room. They must have done something and had another room for him or something, because they're not in the same room. It talks about before the lamp of God went out in the tabernacle of the Lord. That's just a figure of speech, meaning before morning, before dawn. So God is speaking to him at night. It's not dark because the menorah is lit. We don't know how old Samuel was at this point. A later historian says he was 12 years old, but we don't see anything here to say how old he was. He might have been 12. We don't know. This kind of implies that God spoke to him in an audible voice, instead of an inner voice. But we don't know for sure. Somehow God spoke to Samuel, and Samuel heard it, and he responded. And he ran. He didn't know who was calling him. He assumed it was Eli. He ran to Eli. Could you imagine if your kids ran to you when you called? It was like, yeah,
Time for dessert.
yeah.
Yeah.
This is how we should respond when God talks to us. We should say, I'm listening, and run to whoever's calling us. Run to God if he's calling us. But again, Samuel doesn't recognize the voice. He thinks it's Eli, so he runs to Eli. Verse 5 through 9.
It's probably Mary.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, 5 through what?
9.
Oh, okay. I didn't-
Sorry.
And he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." But Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." So he went and he lay down. Again the Lord called Samuel, and Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." "My son," Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. The Lord called Samuel a third time, and Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." Then Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy. One more.
It's
So Eli told Samuel, "Go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place.
what an obedient boy. Running to his master. And Eli says, "Wasn't me talking to you. Go back to bed." You know, it's like,
Stop bothering me.
you woke me up. What? How many times did your kids wake you up at night? What, do you like your kids waking you up at night?
So Samuel's pretty young still here, isn't he?
He is, like I said, Josephus thinks he's about 12.
Yeah.
He's still a boy.
Yeah.
But we don't know how old for sure. So Samuel still doesn't know it's God, and he keeps running back to Eli, thinking, "Why do you keep calling me?" But when it says Samuel did not yet know the Lord, it doesn't mean he's an unsaved pagan type person. It means that yet is very important. He hasn't had a personal encounter with God. Well, he has, but he doesn't know he's had it.
He's having.
He's having it. It's not that he didn't know about God. He's been learning about God. All this is going to change real soon when he realizes who it is. So Eli's finally, the light's finally catching on in Eli's head, and he tells Samuel, "Go back to bed and lay down." So he's saying, make yourself available to God. Listen to see if this voice comes again. Listen for God. And respond and humble yourself before God. It's important to hear God. The preacher may speak. Your friends may speak. I may speak. And it's all fine, but they don't mean anything if God isn't speaking through those voices. Now, God could have just said the first time, "Hey, it's me, God. I need to talk to you." But that's not what he chose. He's actually sending a message to Eli. And it sure got Eli's attention. And again, God is speaking to the child, not to the high priest, because the high priest is not doing his job. So he's using a child. Vicky, verse 10.
The Lord came, stood there, and called as before, "Samuel, Samuel." Samuel responded, speak, for your servant is listening.
Notice God uses his name twice this time, really getting his attention. And when God calls, Samuel follows Eli's instructions, and he responds to God in the right way. Notice it says, and the Lord came and stood. It's possible that the Lord is there in a physical form. If he is, that means Jesus is there physically talking to him. It is not a dream or a vision. Years ago, there was an annoyed senior citizen from Missouri, and he hung up on President Reagan twice. Well, actually more like a half a dozen times. They kept calling and he kept hanging up. He didn't believe the operator when she insisted she was calling from the White House and President Reagan wanted to talk to him. The operator finally convinced him it was real. As a result, he had a chance to chat with President Reagan for about 15 minutes. Samuel did not hang up on God. He responded and said, "Here am I." He's ready to hear God. Verse 11 through 14. It's going to be
Is that me?
one of you two.
The Lord said to Samuel, I'm about to do something in Israel that everyone who hears about it will shudder. On that day I will carry out against Eli everything I said about his family from beginning to end. I told him that I am going to judge his family forever because of the iniquity he knows about. His sons are defiling the sanctuary, and he has not stopped them. Therefore I have sworn to Eli's family. The iniquity of Eli's family will never be wiped out by either sacrifice or offering.
Okay, so think about poor Samuel. This is his first encounter with God, and he doesn't get a flowery "welcome to the ministry" speech. he gets a judgment speech. Luckily, it's not against him. And God says, "I'm going to give everybody tinnitus." That's ringing of the ears. It's a divine tinnitus. And actually, the word used is the same word used for cymbal. Imagine someone coming up with a cymbal and clanging it in your ear. That would wake you up. So this news is pretty severe. I mean, it's the same thing that the prophet came and said, but God is going to give another message to Eli. And this judgment is going to hit Eli hard. It's nothing new. He's already told him. He's just confirming his word. So this judgment is coming against Eli and his house because they blasphemed God, and Eli did nothing to stop it. It was Eli's job to stop his sons and straighten them out, and he didn't. And what's really severe, there's no atonement for this sin. And notice it says that God swears this is going to happen. That's a sure thing. When God swears it's going to happen, there's no chance it's not going to happen. God had warned Samuel with the prophet what was going to happen. That was an invitation to repentance, but he didn't repent. So now comes the judgment.
He warns Eli, you said Samuel.
Oh yeah, Eli, sorry. Did I warn you I was going to do that a lot? So the question comes, is it possible for us to come to a place where we have no atonement? If we reject Jesus Christ, we have no atonement. So Hebrews 10:26 says, if we reject the work of Jesus for us, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sin. So, yes, we can come to the place where where there is no atonement. That is pretty severe. Okay, Betty, now you, verse 15 to 18.
So Samuel lay down until morning. Then he opened the doors of the house of the Lord. But Samuel was afraid to tell the vision to Eli. Then Eli called Samuel and said, Samuel, my son? And he said, Here I am. He said, What is the word that he spoke to you? Please do not hide it from me. May God do so to you and more also, if you hide anything from me of all the words that he spoke to you.
And verse
The
18.
next verse.
Yeah.
So Samuel told him everything and hid nothing from him. And he said, It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him.
Okay, so notice it says he lay down until morning. Doesn't say he slept. I mean, could you sleep? If God gave you that kind of message and you had to tell your surrogate dad. So he gets up in the morning, and it says he opens the doors. Probably the doors to the tabernacle. That was probably another one of his duties. So Eli, he was a terrible dad to his sons and a terrible boss. But Samuel's a second chance, and Eli seems to do a better job. Eli is basically raising Samuel, because remember, he was left there when he was about 3 years old. So he's kind of been the dad. But he can't substitute Samuel for his other two sons, who he has responsibility for.
Did Eli, I'm sorry.
You're doing it too. Make me feel better.
Did Samuel's parents, his mother, know about what was going on with Eli?
Oh, with Eli and his sons?
Yeah.
Did she know the judgment? I don't know.
It sounded like before everybody knew that they were taking, because they asked them to give them some of the sacrifice.
Everybody in the land kind of knew how bad
I would think so.
Eli's sons were. In fact, they think we're going to come up to some verses. People stopped giving to the, stopped sacrificing, because they're saying, why should I? Eli's sons are taking it all. It's not going to the Lord like it should. So they stopped.
But I'm going to ask you, if they knew that, why did they leave Samuel in Eli's care?
Yeah, the Lord, she had vowed that she would. There was no backing out of that vow.
Well, I know that, but I mean, as time went on,
It wasn't Eli.
You
that
don't-
was
you can't
corrupt, was it?
No,
It was
it's his sons. And Eli's sin is not taking care of his sons. But he sure took good care of Samuel.
That's like the grandparents of today. Their kids that they raise go get on drugs and leave their kids with them, but they do a good job with the grandkids.
Yeah.
Raising
Yes.
the grandkids. So
There's
they
a
do
chance,
good
yeah.
job with
There's a
their
lot of
own
grandparents raising their grandkids.
kids. And they're doing a better job than they did with their own kids.
Second
Well,
chance.
yeah. We learn a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
They didn't give us
Learn what
instruction
you did
manuals with
wrong.
our kids. So Eli is anxious to hear this message, even though he kind of already knows what it is. He still wants to hear the whole message. Eli even gives a little curse if Samuel leaves anything out. He says, give me the whole unvarnished truth. And so Samuel does. Doesn't try to whitewash any of it. He just gives God's message. And that's what God wants us to do. If he has a message for us to give, he wants us to give that message. Yeah, even when it can be tough.
Yeah, even when it's not what they want to hear.
So Eli responds and says, God's will be done. So it's hard to tell if he's being really godly and accepting of God, or if he's just fatalistic, giving into, it's going to happen anyway. We don't know. But he knows it's God's rod of correction. He's gotten that message twice now. And again, there's going to be an immediate judgment, but the consequences of the judgment are going to come later. Eli has to wait, knowing judgment is coming. Can you imagine how hard that would be?
Yeah.
If you know something bad is going to happen, having to wait for that shoe to drop. That's got to be tough. Verse 19 and 20. See, are you okay with reading?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and let none of his words fall to the ground. And all Israel from Dan to Beersheba knew that Samuel was established as a prophet of the Lord.
Okay, so Samuel grows not only physically, but spiritually. He's learning about the Lord and just growing so much. And how awesome would it be to know God was with him?
Don't you think that when the Lord appeared to him, it said, no, Samuel did not yet know the Lord, but after that, then he knew
Yeah,
the Lord.
yeah. And more than just a book knowledge. He got to talk to God.
God came and stood before him.
Yep,
You got to see him.
yep. When it says none of his words fell to the ground, that means all of his prophecies are coming to pass. If he prophesies, something is happening. And people knew this. They knew his words were true.
Now before, with other people, they couldn't see God.
Right.
But he comes and stands before this child. And it doesn't say it, but you gotta assume the child could see him, right?
It
Maybe
implies
that's
that.
how he made the child understand
Yeah.
what he was telling him.
Yeah, and we don't know if there was more to that conversation. If he said, I'm going to be using you, or we don't know. But Deuteronomy 18:21 and 22 told us about prophets. It said, you may say in your heart, how will we know the word which the Lord has not spoken? When a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, if the thing does not come about or come true, that is the thing which the Lord has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously. He shall not be afraid of him. So a sign of a prophet is that every prophecy they speak comes true. Every single one. I mean, we've had people, remember 2012 and all the prophecies and that everyone had, and
The world was going to end because of the
yeah, the Mayan calendar and all that other stuff, and every single person that prophesied that is a false prophet because none of it came true.
For all the preparation that we made for the year 2000.
Oh yeah, 2000, yeah.
And, you know, we had churches, committees that, okay, what are we gonna do? It was crazy.
Just keep going, doing what we've been doing.
Yeah, go back to paper and pencil.
Yeah.
Again, I go back to his words.
My
Wait
friend
upon
went
the Lord.
crazy doing
Yeah,
I said, hey, whatever happens, happens.
yeah.
It'll be okay. And sure enough, everybody just,
So here he gets the title of prophet of the Lord. Samuel is seen as the last judge and the first prophet. He's like the bridge between the two. And here we see that phrase from Dan to Beersheba. Anytime you see that phrase, you could just substitute it for meaning all of Israel. Because Dan was the northernmost city and Beersheba was the southernmost city. So it's talking about all 150 miles of Israel. So the whole country is hearing about Samuel and how he's a prophet of the Lord. Verse 21.
The Lord continued to appear to in Shiloh because there he revealed himself to Samuel by his word.
Okay, remember at the beginning of the chapter it said God was not speaking. He's speaking now because he has a prophet. He has someone that hears his word and passes that word on. He is revealing himself through Samuel. Whenever God is moving, he will reveal himself through his word. Now he's preparing Samuel for some pretty difficult times ahead. Israel is going to face some hard times. So we're going to go right in and see the first hard time they're facing with Samuel around.
It's interesting. We go back to 11, and when God speaks to him, he doesn't give him instructions on what to do. He says, I'm about to do something in Israel. Was what God was going to do, which was important.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't say now to prepare for this, you need to do this. No, it just says this is what I'm doing. Okay, verse 1 and 2 of chapter 4.
Thus the word of Samuel came to all Israel. Now Israel went out to meet the Philistines in battle and camped beside Ebenezer, while the Philistines camped in Aphek. And the Philistines drew up in battle array to meet Israel. When the battle spread, Israel was defeated before the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 men on the battlefield.
Okay, so the first part of verse 1 where it says, and the word of Samuel came to all Israel, probably really belongs with the last chapter. Remember when they wrote the Old Testament, they didn't have chapters and verses. This is the last thing we hear about Samuel in this chapter. He is not involved in this battle with the Philistines. He is not saying God told you to go, or we hear nothing about him through the rest of this chapter. Tradition has that the Philistines actually start this conflict.
Israel went up.
Yeah, this is one of those rare times in Israel's history where there isn't a mighty nation trying to take them over. Egypt isn't trying to take them over. Assyria isn't trying to take them over. They're usually stuck in the middle of those things. So none of that, but they got the Philistines, which could be worse. There's still plenty of wars going on. They got the Ammonites and the Moabites, so they have all these local wars and the Philistines. Israel was pretty much on equal terms with Moab and the Ammonites. They had the similar weapons and things like that. But with the Philistines, they were in trouble. The Philistines had first come from the island of Crete. And they were mercenary soldiers. They were trained to be fighting men. So they came and they were going to fight against Egypt. Well, that didn't go well for them. So they end up settling in Israel. And they settle in the southern coastal region, which is Palestine today. Philistines, Palestine, connection. Gaza is one of their big cities. Gaza is one of the big cities of the Palestinians. So these guys were warlike people, and they had the latest in helmets, in shields, in armor, in swords and spears, and they had chariots. Israel had none of that. So they were facing them in battle. It was a tough time for Israel because of these Philistines, and we're going to see them. They have to keep facing these Philistines. It's the first time we see the Philistines in 1 Samuel, but we're going to see them 182 times more in 1 and 2 Samuel. They're just going to be there bugging them. Causing trouble. When it says the Philistines drew up lines, that indicates that this battle is going to be on an open field, which is great for the Philistines with their chariots. Those chariots are dangerous weapons. The Israelites don't have much of a chance here. And it is disastrous for them. They lose 4,000 men. So verse 3 and 4. Did you read last?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought so. And when the people came to the camp, the elders of Israel said, "Why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord from Shiloh, that it may come among us and save us from the power of our enemies." So the people sent to Shiloh and brought up from there the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, who is enthroned on the cherubim. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant of the people. So the survivors, they straggle into camp. They're called people, not soldiers, because they are farmers and they're not trained soldiers. So they're called people rather than the army. And they moan and groan and say, "Why didn't God let us win? We're God's people. Why did we lose?" You don't see them go ask God, "Why did we lose?" Because God would have told them, and they would have had a chance to repent. But no, they come up with their own plan. They decide they're going to take God with them in battle. But it's all wrong. They decide they're going to take the ark into battle. The ark is not God. They think it's a good luck charm. They think that if they take this with them, God has to come with them. He has to protect that ark. They confuse the symbol of God's presence with the actual presence of God.
Isn't that kind of making the ark an idol?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. They are not going to God. They're supposed to be looking to God. They think they can force God to fight for them. Now, only the high priest was ever to see the ark. And that one day a year. He was to go into the tabernacle, into the Holy of Holies, one day a year. And in fact, they would tie a rope around his waist so that if he went into the Holy of Holies and he offended God and God struck him dead, they could pull him out because they could not go in there. So they're planning to take that Holy of Holies, or that ark, out of the Holy of Holies.
That would remind you to behave yourself while that thing tied around your waist too.
Yeah. Now they have used the ark in battle before, when God told them to. They used it at Jericho, and they used it. They used it when they fought against the Midianites. But a big difference. God again told them to. You see God in this at all? We don't see God telling them to take the ark at all. They've come up with this genius plan. And you remember when the ark was moved, they were instructed to cover it with all the drapes of the tabernacle, and they were told to carry it with poles. Don't know if they were doing any of that.
Well, because if anybody touched it, they were struck dead.
But we don't know if they're... Now, it brings up a good question. Where is the ark now?
In heaven.
You mean literally?
Where is the ark now?
Literally, I think.
We don't know for sure. It is in Revelation that it will come back. The last time we hear of its location, King Josiah of Judah ordered the ark to be returned to the temple of Jerusalem. 40 years later, King Nebuchadnezzar captured that temple, and he took everything of value. 10 years later, he comes back and takes anything that's left, and he burns down the city. There's a book that called Second Maccabees. It occurs between the Old and New Testament. It's not part of our Bible. It's part of the Catholic Bible, but it's a historical book. It reports that just prior to the Babylonian invasion, Jeremiah had a divine revelation, and he ordered that the tabernacle and the ark that it be given to him, and I assume he had people with him, and he took it to Mount Nebo, and he found a cave, and he buried it in there and covered the cave up. Another theory, there's a claim that it's hidden below the Temple Mount today, and it's been buried there since Nebuchadnezzar came. And if they could excavate, they'd find the ark. But they can't excavate because it's under the Dome of the Rock, which is Muslim, and they won't let them excavate. One interesting theory is that it's buried under the hill of Tara in Ireland.
In Ireland.
In
Where
Ireland.
did that come from?
And some people think this is the source of the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Oh,
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah. Well, Raiders of the Lost Ark, according to that, it's in a warehouse somewhere. Which there's so much about that movie that it's a good, I love that movie, but yeah, biblically, yeah, not so much. Okay, so they take the ark, and the sons of Eli are with them. Hophni and Phinehas are with them. They should know better, but they don't. So they're there with the ark.
But Eli is the high priest.
Eli is the high priest.
Why would
Eli
he let somebody go in?
Eli is ineffective.
Yeah.
He's old. He's blind. He's at this point he's 90-something years old. We'll see. He's just
That's really not old for them.
it calls him old. So he's old. Okay, verse 5.
As soon as the ark of the covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all Israel gave a mighty shout so that the earth resounded.
Have you ever been anywhere where the noise was so loud, the earth kind of shook? We used to live about a mile away from where the Fontana Motor Speedway is.
Oh.
Actually, it was more like 3 miles away. But you could tell when races were going on, and it was just so loud. Yeah. Yeah, those engines were loud, but the crowd was loud. Yeah. So that's what's happening here. The crowd is so loud and cheering about this thing. They're so excited that the ground is kind of shaking.
kind of cool.
And they're probably thinking, oh, we're so much better than those pagan Philistines because we got the ark. But they're thinking like pagans in that they think they can manipulate God. If they had approached God in the right way, in a humble way, God would have heard. But they are shouting so loud that it's shaking the earth, but God's not hearing a thing. Because they're not talking to him. Verse 6 through 9.
Hearing the uproar, the Philistines asked, "What's all this shouting in the Hebrew camp?" When they learned that the ark of the Lord has come into the camp, the Philistines were afraid. "A god has come into the camp," they said. "We're in trouble. Nothing like this has happened before. Woe to us. Who will deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods? They are the gods who struck the Egyptians with all kinds of plagues in the desert. Be strong, Philistines. Be men, or you will be subject to the Hebrews, as they have been to you. Be men and fight."
I'm glad you really emphasized God and gods. You notice it's all little g. The Philistines think the Israelites are as pagan as they are, and that they are polytheists, which means they believe in multiple gods. So they think the Israelites are just like them. Now, what would give them the idea that they're just like them? Because they're acting just like them. So they just assume, yeah, they got a lot of gods. We saw in Judges they were worshiping a lot of gods and a lot of idols. So why would the Philistines think any different? No, they were to stand apart. It's the same thing for us. Does the world see a difference in us? Or do they think we're we worship the same things the world worships. So the Israelites are thinking, well, when they hear that we have the ark, they're going to be afraid. But it rallies the Philistines. They say, oh, we're going to have that much more courage and be stronger, and opposite effect of what they probably thought was going to happen.
It kind of gave the Philistines an incentive.
Yeah, they're not backing down, because to them, the gods are not. They can conquer gods, is what they feel like. So they're not worried about the God of Israel, the little g of Israel, because they don't know his might and his power. And it ends up, it didn't matter. Verse 10 and 11.
So the Philistines fought, and Israel was defeated, and every man fled to his tent. It was a very great slaughter, and there fell of Israel 30,000 foot soldiers. Also the ark of God was captured, and the 2 sons of Eli. I can't
Those
say.
two guys.
Yeah, they both died.
Okay, so they lose the battle majorly, and it says everyone went to their tent. That's another word for meaning the army was disbanded. They're done fighting. They don't want any more of it. They lost the battle. The last battle, they lost 4,000 guys. Now they lose 32,000 guys. 7 times more guys. And they had the ark. Did that ark help them?
Do you think they got the message?
Yeah. So why didn't it work? Well, the Philistines were fighting like desperate men. While the Israelites may not have been trying so hard because they thought, oh, we have the ark.
Yeah.
This is going to be a breeze. They're not fighting like desperate men. And most importantly, God didn't bless this superstition.
Well, because the Philistines up there in verse 9, take courage, be men, lest you become slaves to the Hebrews, as they've been to you. Be men and fight.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Be all that you can.
People today put a lot of faith in things. I mean, I was looking at religious relics, and it's amazing the relics they have. Pieces of the cross. People say they have pieces of the original cross. I hate to say it, it's a piece of wood. It's just wood. It's nothing magical to that piece of wood. They have the skulls of people. They have hair of people. They just all sorts of things that they idolize and think have magical powers. And God isn't about magical powers. There's a little closer to home, people that will do that with a cross necklace, the cross hanging in the church. It's a symbol to draw us to God. There's no magical power in wearing a cross on your neck or the cross in a church. It is to help us reflect on Jesus and his sacrifice. There's no magical power in ours. Is made of wood, but they make them of metal and everything else. It's a cross, a symbol. In fact, to the Roman world, when people started idolizing crosses, they were thinking, what are these people doing? Because the cross was a symbol of torture and death. And they're saying, you're hanging an electric chair on your neck? You know, they couldn't see the sense in that. But again, it's to draw us to remember what Christ did for us.
And to tell others.
It tells of your faith.
This is what I believe.
Yeah.
This is what I believe. And I'm not going to take this off for anybody.
Yeah, and that's fine, as long as you're not idolizing that cross, but it's remembering what it's about.
Like you went through.
So God didn't feel obligated at all to help them because they had that ark. In fact, They lose the ark. And you have to wonder, the Philistines, we don't know if the Israelites carried it the right way and everything. Did the Philistines carry it the right way? We don't know. It doesn't say.
They had
Probably
no
not.
reason to.
Yeah, they probably
Look
thought
at
it was
one
just,
of their chariots and took off.
yeah. So when the Philistines capture the ark, they think they've captured the Israelite God. Because they believe
The power that Israel
that God,
of
lived
course.
in that thing. And so to them, it proved that their gods were greater than the Israelites' God. So that ark is taken, but God was still on the throne. He wasn't in that ark. Israel thought they could ignore God and find deliverance in the ark. But God showed he is greater than that ark. And Hophni and Phinehas died. We don't find out how they died. Did they die in battle? We don't know. Back in chapter 2, God promised Eli that both of his sons would die on the same day. And here it's fulfilled. In the late 1970s, they found a 5-line inscription on a grain silo in the ruins of a city in Israel. And when they deciphered it, it was a Philistine account of this battle and the capture of the ark, even specifically naming Hophni. Archaeology continues to prove the Bible true. So this is where we're going to end, and we'll start on verse 12 next week. So let me shut this off.